It's my pleasure to welcome you to the second annual Global Business Leaders Conference. I'm Peter Zemsky, the Interim Dean of the school. We're very pleased to have here with us today alumni, current students, faculty, invited leaders of business and government organizations, some of our entrepreneurs, and a very distinguished group of speakers and panelists. INSEAD was founded in the 1950s to help bring peace and prosperity to Europe. Inspired by the legendary business school professor George Dorio, we pioneered modern management education in Europe, introducing the MBA degree and executive education, and in the process, helping to forge a pan-European business community. We're fortunate to have with us here today one of our founders, Claude Janssen, who is still watching over us and inspiring our efforts. By the 1990s, like many other leading European institutions, we turned our attention to emerging markets, opening first a campus in Singapore and then more recently in Abu Dhabi, becoming now a global platform, forging a global business community. Over 40% of our MBA teaching happens in Singapore today. However, as we look around at what's happening back in Europe, we find ourselves called back to our roots, back to our original mission to help bring peace and prosperity to Europe. As growth fades and the specter of unemployment, especially mass unemployment among the continent's youth, has spread, it is clear that prosperity in Europe, at least, can no longer be taken for granted. Too often as a school, we find ourselves helping talented Europeans connect with professional opportunities in other parts of the world. Less and less do we see students from the west of the world staying on in Europe. It's troubling. In July 2012, we decided to act and launched our initiative on European competitiveness, harnessing the energy and intellect of faculty from every academic area of the school. Our focus on youth, on entrepreneurship, and on corporate strategy and turnarounds and change shapes our perspective on the long-term competitiveness of Europe. Relative to 50 years ago, we can now bring a vast array of strengths to these challenges, including our alumni community of over 40,000, a world-class faculty, and a deep understanding of European businesses and institutions relative to those in other parts of the world. It's our belief, quite simply, that the time has come to again rally European business leaders to assure continued prosperity and social peace on the continent. We cannot do this alone. We are reaching out to our corporate and consulting partners, to national and European institutions, to other research institutions, and of course, and very importantly, to our alumni community. For today's conference, I would like to especially recognize the OECD, our knowledge partner and host today, and the International Herald Tribune, our media partner, for their collaboration. Thank you very much. If we could have a round of applause. It's my pleasure to now introduce to you our Master of Ceremony, Javier Gimeno, a colleague of mine in the Strategy Department and the Academic Director of the INSEAD European Competitiveness Initiative. I wish you all an excellent day, rich in traditional INSEAD debate, and hopefully fertile in its conclusions. Thank you very much. Javier?
Good afternoon and welcome to these wonderful facilities of OECD. My name is Javier Gimeno. As Peter mentioned, I have been leading this European Competitiveness Initiative over the last year. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you to our first conference under the title of Europe Converging on Competitiveness. The European Competitiveness Initiative was born with a desire from the ground of INSEAD and the faculty to try to understand better and engage with the reality that we are facing in Europe. We are doing research, we are writing cases, and we are engaging with alumni, and business leaders, and policymakers to understand and have an impact. Now, the title of our conference today talks about converging. And we use this word with two meanings. The first is about the debate that has been going on over the last 2 years in Europe between the proponents of austerity and the proponents of growth. Of course, these are coded words. We recently ran a survey in cooperation with Booz and the European Executive Council that was presented a few weeks ago on the State of the European Union. And there we asked a series of questions to business leaders, many of them INSEAD alumni, about what were the things that they found some agreement. Issues such as austerity have some strong proponents, but also some people that are not supportive. It was competitiveness and productivity as the agenda that really was able to rally around most of the business leaders. 88% of the respondents, which is an amazing number whenever you do any survey, said that improving competitiveness and productivity is the key economic priority for Europe over the next 3 to 5 years. And the reason is that competitiveness as a theme brings together the two dimensions of growth, but responsible growth based on effective allocation of resources to investments that will produce value in the future. The second meaning of the word of convergence is the importance of converging within Europe. Europe has some of the most competitive economies in the world. So if you take EU plus EFTA countries, Switzerland is #1, most of the Nordic, German, and some others are in the top 10. But we also have a long tail, and there is great economic value by facilitating the convergence of those economies naturally to the top. Now, coming from a business school, we want to have a special and different voice on the topic of competitiveness. And that is represented with what we call the firm-level perspective. We are business school professors, we engage with business, and businesses are the key partners in value creation and the critical players on competitiveness. Of course, policy is important, but we cannot wait for politicians. Business leaders need to act. So bringing the theme of competitiveness, a few months ago I asked our alumni about their understanding about the most admired companies around the world and how European companies play in that role. Slide, please. So what you see here is an extract from the Fortune magazine list of the top, the most admired corporations, and it takes the top 10 from the US, top 10 from Asia, and top 10 from Europe. And I would like you to see if you can identify what is the pattern. Here are the list of the top 10 companies from the United States, companies well known like Apple, Google, Amazon, IBM, Procter & Gamble. These are from Asia, also great companies like Toyota, Sony, Honda, Singapore Airlines. And this is the list of companies from Europe, companies that we are all proud of, like BMW, Volkswagen, Siemens, L'Oreal, Novartis. Now, do you see the pattern? Now, if you look at the age of these companies, what you see is that 60% of the companies that are in the top 10 most admired list in the US were started after 1970. If you look at Europe, 0% were like that. In fact, the youngest on this list started in 1937. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. We are proud of these companies. But it's also a signal that Europe maybe need a dynamism to create enterprises that can quickly grow to global scale, as some of the American and Asian counterparts do. So Europe has not created the high growth, young multinationals that we call the gazelles. And the point here is that this is not just about ICT, right? So look at FedEx, look at Starbucks, look at Southwest Airlines. These are not ICT companies. They succeed because of business model innovation. Now, the company that we'll have today for the keynote speech is one company that was selected among the respondents to a survey that I did alumni about which is the European company that you would most likely expect to be in this list by 2022, hopefully before that. So it's a company that has been active on business model innovation. Now, clearly we need to go beyond the large multinationals and understand the other parts of the business fabric. And we also, in the State of the EU, run an analysis about how different types of companies can contribute to European competitiveness. So we asked the respondents, over the next 10 years, which type of business organizations will have the strongest impact in improving productivity in Europe? This was a forced choice, so they answered number 1, number 2, number 3, all the way to 6. These are the results, but without the labels. So clearly there was a type of company that appeared to be most important in terms of improving productivity, and that was European medium-sized companies with 82%. You might be surprised. I think after we listen to our presentation of the first panel today, you might understand why these type of companies are so important for the economy. The number 2 was European startups. And clearly this reflects the importance and in a way, the insufficient activity that we are doing in terms of the entrepreneurship. There is a need to emphasize entrepreneurship because of the dynamics of the business environment. And finally, multinationals, both multinationals from Europe or from abroad that are doing business. These multinationals bring best practices, they allocate resources effectively, and they are key partners on improving competitiveness in the continent. So I want to give you these ideas in order to explain the structure of our conference today. We will start with a keynote speech, focusing on the company Inditex and how it uses its business model to create value beyond profits. And then the conference is structured about 3 types of panels around this type of issues. The first one will focus on medium-sized companies and how do they achieve business excellence to be able to compete with the best in the world. The second will focus on the entrepreneurial ecosystem and what can be done to make Europe more entrepreneurial. And finally, the last one will focus on the multinational viewpoint. So how do multinationals view Europe? Now, it's important that you stay until the end because these are going to be firm-level perspectives that will be put together at the end with a panel that will talk about how to bring these ideas into action, one of the favorite words of Georges Doriot. And to do that, we'll have representatives from academia, the business world, and the government and quasi-governmental organizations to discuss how to put this into practice. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you a very dear member to the school, a person that knew Georges Doriot, the founder, the person that brought inspiration for INSEAD, and this is Claude Janssen, co-founder of INSEAD and honorary chairman of the school. Claude, the floor is yours. Thank you.